They were deploying like some special covert action team on the Mexican soil. Like CIA did like everywhere, I would say worldwide. But it's more than that, like they gather intelligence, they recruit source, and they prepare covert actions as well. And I was like, and international law, he was smiling, he said like, Gregory, like we are doing the same in Ukraine, like CIA is making covert action here, and you think we are like referring like to the White House or something.
In this video, French reporter Gregory Prilion details America's secret war in Mexico waged against the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel. The covert war represents the joint efforts of Navy SEALs, Delta Force operators, the CIA's intelligence support activity, and Mexico's own special forces. We talk about the operations already taking place in Mexico and those that Donald Trump has signaled will come next month. I'm Daniel Boguslaw. This is Deeper States. Okay, well, we're here with Gregory Prilion of Intelligence Online. We're here to talk about an incredible article he wrote a couple months ago. The title of the article is SEAL Team 6 DIA, the Secret U.S. Architecture Against Mexican Cartels. In the past few weeks, there's been reports emerging that Donald Trump is not playing around when it comes to potentially airstrikes inside of Mexico and also potentially direct action from U.S. Special Forces. But before major U.S. publications got this news, Gregory broke an incredible story about very specific details of ongoing U.S. operations south of the border. You wrote a two-part series, one sort of mapping out the surveillance architecture and ISR architecture on the U.S.-Mexican border, but you also wrote a second part in that series with hyper-specific details about the ongoing activities that are already happening, both in terms of collaboration between U.S. intelligence and DoD components with their Mexican counterparts, and, if I'm getting your article correct, independent operations, some taking place off the West Coast in Baja California. You also mentioned a whole litany of different types of special forces groups, tier one operators conducting all sorts of support missions, in addition to the CIA's ISA also having a hand in all of this. So, Gregory, thank you for doing this interview. I was wondering if we could start out sort of having you walk us through the big picture of what you discovered, what it means, and how these different pieces in the second part of your series sort of fit together.
Honestly, I was pretty surprised, like to meet like some of my sources. It was in Western Europe, like those guys, they were like serving in the American Special Forces, and I met them previously in Ukraine, and we got like amazing discussion about their next deployment. And they told me like, okay, mate, like we're gonna be deployed in Mexico, and I was wow. And they said, yeah, actually, like the CIA, the GSOC, they are like gathering a lot of intelligence about like the Mexican cartels, and I was pretty amazed. So we continued the discussion, and they explained to me how this works actually. So in terms of technology, how to gather like intelligence to create like some targeting files to chase like some like cartels leaders, to analyze their network. And I was pretty amazed because they mobilize a lot of technologies. They use like Palantir technologies, they use drones as well, and they are even operating offshores. Like it's like one of them like is an ex Navy SEALs Team 6, yes, sorry. And he told me, yeah, actually, like my ex team is like deployed in Baja California. And I was, what the fuck, what's going on? And he told me, yeah, it's shadow operation. He told me it's not new. Like Reagan have done it, so Trump is doing the same. So I was pretty impressed that like no one was talking about that, like in American press, in Western Europe press as well, that Trump like was deploying like a huge shadow architecture for covert operation in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. You reported that DevGru SEAL Team 6 was actually operating, and they've actually been doing interdiction missions off the coast.
Exactly, yeah.
South of the border, right? Like off the Mexican coast.
Yeah, exactly. They try to intercept like some naval convoy of like chemical components, like to create like fentanyl, and I was pretty amazed because they made like a huge work of intelligence. It was really impressive, like when they described me this whole architecture.
I think like a lot of times this stuff gets reported, in U.S. congressional testimony. Little bits of this gets leaked out in terms of DoD support activity, right? The idea that we're sending special operators or special forces teams to train Mexican special forces,
Yeah.
our partners.
I heard that in Chiapas, for example, they were training the Green Berets, they were training the local forces. But the main thing was that, and I was
Right.
pretty impressed, like to gather intelligence, like without any agreement with the Mexican state. That's crazy. And
Yeah.
it's
So
funny because the guy told me like he told me, Greg, like we're able to do that. Like you're not naive to believe that's not possible. And I'm like, yeah, I know that, but for me it's crazy.
well, yeah, and that specific relationship, right? The idea of where does training move into direct action? Where does ISA, intelligence gathering move into actual boots on the ground, door kickers, trigger pullers? This gets into a really interesting component that's tacked on in that special box at the end of your article, specifically about the intelligence support activity, the CIA's sort of direct action branch. I mean, I'll read from the piece. A little bit, which is you talk about ISA being deployed, infiltrated into the border states of Tamaulipas, Nuevo Leon, Michoacan, all of which are key areas of the logistics networks. But you also say that this is not just surveillance. You say their mission is twofold: to penetrate the traffickers' networks, to identify logisticians and their family contacts, to install technical geolocation, tactical listening, and video surveillance devices at logistics sites, um, and routes used to transport chemical precursors for the manufacture of fentanyl. So we're actually talking about like embedded um, special operators at this point, right?
And even they recruit sources, local sources. The guy told me like they've got even a Mexican network of sources to help them in those operations. So that's pretty impressive because so I was pretty shocked like to after like having this big map like at home I was like what the fuck, that's pretty big, that's pretty huge.
Right. It covers a huge amount of territory, different choke points, different cartels, some of which are fighting with each other. I was
Yeah.
wondering if you could talk a little bit about the floating forward operating base that you write about. I know that special forces nerds have been trying to track that vessel for a long time. The last time I think it pinged on a map was, I believe, in the Mediterranean. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about this idea. I mean, you have this forward base deployed off another country's coast.
Yeah, this kind of like naval base, like floating base, they were creating like specially for covert actions because they can cut the IIS, like the tool like we able like to detect them, like to localize them, and even they can like switch it or even like for example the boat can be like in the Sea of California, in the Gulf of Mexico, sorry, and it could be in the Mediterranean Sea for real. So they are able like to hide such like boats, and on such vessel you've got like the whole equipment to conduct like such covert actions. You've got like central post command, you've got like satellite communication, you've got even drones, they can launch drones like from those like platform. So they've got the whole, I'd say that the whole architecture like is based on such like inflatable like vessels. That's pretty interesting because honestly I never heard about that before. So I investigate about the location of this boat, about the teams deployed on it, and I was like, it's really huge. Like really, like Donald Trump really launched like for me a war on drugs like Reagan have done it like during the 80s. It's exactly the same, I would say, same architecture like with more modern tool.
And so, on that note, I wanted to turn to what you write about Delta Force. You describe them being kind of, in one sense, part of the Baja, the Western Mexican operation side. But you also write that they're responsible for capturing high value targets.
So basically, the story is really funny because it's connected to Ukraine. Like that's crazy because this conflict is in the far east in a way, and I'm there and they should like capture like some drug like I would say that cartel chief, and I was like that's real or it's a movie. Like he was like no, Gregory, I'm not joking. Like those guys they are involved in real covert action on Mexicans, so to capture like such like high value targets. I was like yeah, that's true, yeah. And the connection between Ukraine and Mexico is really crazy because you've got like this war against fentanyl, and at the same time, like recently, I found that the cartel they sent some Mexicans in the international relation of the military intelligence of Ukraine to train themselves to pilot FPV drones. Basically, it's those guys they are ex like Mexican special forces, but they work for the Mexican cartel of Sinaloa, for example, and they send them in Ukraine to train to the drone warfare.
Wow.
So those guys they join the Ukrainian army, like special units in the Ukrainian army, and they fight on the front line. But basically, they are here to learn how to use FPV drones, and that's crazy because recently, like Colombians, they did the same in Colombia. They used the same skills and techniques to destroy like a police helicopter. And like some source of mine, like in Mexico, they told me, yeah, actually, we can see like some FPV drones used on the ground, and
Crazy.
the connection are really crazy between
So yeah, it's
those
it's
two
it's
conflicts.
moving in both directions.
Yeah.
Speaking of moving in both directions, I wanted to also ask you sort of about some of what you wrote in the first part of the piece in terms
Hmm.
of the intelligence collection and fusion centers being not only like U.S. collection being fed back into Texas or El Paso or whatever into those collection centers, but also there being embedded U.S. fusion centers basically in Mexico. Could you describe a little bit of the embedded collection architecture that exists south of the border, but which is powered with U.S. backing?
But for example, like at the border, like in Ciudad Juarez, like you've got a tower owned by the Mexican government, but mainly inside you've got like Mexican like military intelligence involved, and they deployed like American technologies to MC catchers, like a lot of different technologies, like to gather intelligence about like the signal intelligence tools, like to collect as much as possible data about like Mexican cartels, like which kind of like radio channel they're using, which kind of communication architecture they are like building actually. So it's pretty impressive because it's like a kind of massive data intelligence gathering that Mexican intelligence agency are doing, but they are doing it with American tools. And some sources, local sources, told me there are actually agreement to share those information with the CIA, for example.
So, based on the sort of accumulated information of all your sources, I mean, right now it looks like, as always with the US president, there's going to be a menu of options presented to him, right? And a lot of the reporting that's emerged in the past few weeks about what the next steps in Mexico are have suggested that come mid September, there could be overt action going on in Mexico, whether that's the authorization of aerial strikes or whether that's the authorization of targeted direct action from special operators on the ground. What do you think the sense is from the people you've spoken to about what this looks like? 2 weeks out, a month out, 6 months out, a year out. I mean, I've read a lot of analysis saying that the cartels have some similarities to insurgent groups in the Middle
Exactly.
East
Yeah.
in terms of the distributed quality of them, but at the same time, they also are not ideological in the same way. They are embedded into the economy in a way that is very different from the insurgent conflicts waged in the Middle East. So, in terms of long term prognosis for this conflict, should there be an escalation in direct action, what does that look like going forward?
Like your analysis is pretty good, like because like you say, like it's pretty similar to a counterinsurgency war, but mainly like you say, like cartel are really involved in all the Mexican economy, in the local politics, even national politics. So it's much more complicated. Like my sources told me, like they don't believe like in an escalation, like airstrike or something like that, because it would be too dangerous for America because even like Mexican cartel, they've got power on the U.S. soil in terms of retaliation. So mainly, actually, they choose this covert action because basically they can cut the head of the snake because they've got intelligence, they've got like foot on the ground, but like involved in shadow covert operation. So no need to use like A-10 Warthog or F-35 like to destroy Mexican cartel, because first you will have like too much civilian casualties. It would be covered by the local media, international media. It will be too much blood, and I would say too much like footage on the TV every day. So basically, they choose like this shadow operation, covert operation, because basically they are the much more interesting to deploy in on Mexican soil. You can like capture the head of the cartel, or you can kill them, and at least you can destroy all the infrastructure, all the logistic of those like cartels. Because to produce fentanyl or other kind of drugs, they need trucks, they need like storage, they need as well connection with China, because most of the chemical product they are coming from China, from Asia. So that's why like they deploy this architecture. It's a smart one.
Target packages have included cartel leadership. So the current and former operators you spoke with, they feel confident that there would be serious degrading effect from taking out that leadership.
Mainly, that's the position of most of those guys, like serving in special forces. Because like they told me, like because most of them they were deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they said actually we are not making the same mistake. We are targeting those guys, not in the town, in the countryside. We are like burning their logistic supply. They try to cut off like those guys from their like logistic, even from the cash as well, because like they say to me, they are following the money as well.
Right.
So
And it's not so and you're saying that it's not entrenched urban warfare. It's much more targeted, degrading strikes on leadership and logistics. Interesting. Has anything come up since you wrote this piece, or while you were writing this piece, about the similar escalation or buildup with Venezuela? I mean, in the past 2 weeks, I think the U.S. has moved like
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
battle groups off the coast. There's been a lot of reporting following your initial reporting on what's going on in Mexico. The New York Times came out and, as we talked about, bit some of your reporting and described, the discussions and the target packages that have been created. But have you heard anything about Venezuela or similar actions? Maduro said he's mobilizing, I think, 6 million members of their state militia, but there's been very little on that since the news about the destroyer groups.
Now, some of my sources told me that, like, actually they are preparing operation, but mainly the main threat, actually, like one guy told me, is that like you've got a lot of Russian advisor in Venezuela. They've got a lot of equipment. They are pretty skilled, so it's a tough job, like much more than like striking like cartels leaders, because it's Venezuelan state, it's a dictatorship. They've got like good weapons. They are pretty skilled. So yeah, it's much more difficult, I think, to destabilize Venezuela than attacking like, I wouldn't say random Mexican cartel, because they are powerful, but they are less powerful than the Venezuelan state.
Okay, my last question for you is, why do you think no one in America was able to break what you were able to break? I mean, we have the New York Times, the Washington Post, who knows how many other small publications focused on military activities, special operations. It's embarrassing, no?
I was pretty shocked, but my theory is that like for my like American source in Ukraine or whatever, I'm not basically a risk because I'm French. I'm not an American citizen. And mainly, even if I told them like several times, like I'm working for an international publication, for them, I'm a French guy. So for them, like when they talk about that in Ukraine or in Western Europe, like it's far from the US US soil. I think they didn't like really, when they told me that, they didn't think it was a threat like for them, or even for Trump policy in a way. We struggle with the Russian threat, and drug like is not the priority. And even when you talk of this topic, like even with specialists, they're like, oh, it's not so interesting.
Okay, well, Gregory, if people want to read breaking news a month or two before the American press gets it, where can they read your work, find you?
Basically, we are on X, like the name of my publication is Intelligence Online.
Well, thank you so much, Gregory.
Thank you, Daniel.
I hope we can have you back on with some more crazy.
Yeah, totally. We stay in touch.
This was the first part in a multi-part series on the ensuing war in Mexico and what's next south of the border. If you like this video, like and subscribe. We got a lot more in the pipe.